Next, we're going to talk about the classification or different types of traceability that we're concerned with. On one hand, there are pre- and post-traceability. So you have your requirements, goals, scenarios, and other inputs, and you have predecessor artifacts to those or successor artifacts to those. So pre-traceability of requirements is therefore concerned with the relationships from requirement artifacts to aspects in the 4 context facets. Just a reminder, what are those? Subject, usage, IT system, and development. That could mean that you're maybe tracing back a requirement to its origin in one of those 4 context facets. On the other hand, post-traceability of requirements is concerned with the relationships between a requirement artifact and their successor artifact. So pretty much what we've just seen in the figure before. And then also very important, we also would like to know something about the traceability among requirements. So what are the relationships there? For example, requirement A is a refinement, a generalization, or a replacement to requirement B. So pre-traceability, post-traceability, and the traceability among requirements. We're also further interested in the different classes of traceability relationships. There are 5 that cover most of your cases that you will encounter as a requirement engineer: condition, content, abstraction, evolution, and miscellaneous. Let's first talk about the conditions. That could be constraints, like artifact A defines a constraint on artifact B, or they could be preconditions. Artifact A defines a condition that must be fulfilled before artifact B can be realized. So constraint and precondition. For content, you can have something like similar, compares, contradicts, and conflicts, where similar means you have 2 associated artifacts that are similar in content. Or if you have compare, it means artifact A1 represents the result of a comparison of the artifacts A2 to AN. Or contradictions, where 2 artifacts cannot be realized together, then we're back to negotiations and conflict resolutions from the previous lectures. And there could be also a relationship conflicts. Artifact A may hinder, but not necessarily exclude the realization of artifact B. That also might be a cause to go back to negotiation. Next, we have the traceability relationship of abstraction, where you have classifies, aggregates, and generalizes. For classifies, we have the example of an artifact A that classifies a set of artifacts B1 to Bn. It could be a goal classifies a set of solution-oriented requirements. For aggregate, we could have an artifact A that is an aggregation of a set of other artifacts B1 to Bn, or the generalization where artifact A is a generalization of one or several other artifacts, such as an abstract scenario, like type scenario, is a generalization of a set of more concrete scenarios, like an instance scenario. I know all of this sounds a little bit confusing, but we'll get into this maybe with some exercises later on. Next, the traceability relationship of evolution, where you have replace based on formalizes, refines, and derives. Replace, pretty simple, artifact B replaces artifact A. Or based on, where you have artifact A has influenced the definition of artifact B. And for formalize, we have an artifact A, which is a formal documentation of artifact B. Could be something like relating to a solution-oriented requirement model to a set of textual requirements or something similar. Refinement being quite straightforward. Artifact A refines artifact B. And similarly, derivation is artifact A was derived based on a set of other artifacts, such as artifact B. So far, quite straightforward. And then we have the category of miscellaneous traceability relationships. That could be something like example of, where artifact A contains exemplary aspects of a set of artifacts, or the verifies column, where a test artifact A verifies a requirement artifact B. So the relationship between test artifact and requirement. Or the rational category or type, where you have an artifact A that justifies artifact B, such as a text fragment that contains justification for the existence of a scenario. So now you're already getting the idea why we're not just concerned with managing requirements, and therefore not only the traceability of requirements, but also all the other information that we had in the requirements management lecture before. So requirements, use cases, are all kind of other artifacts. So they had this larger figure there, and there you can really nicely see that you also are concerned with all the relationships that you have to trace between those different artifacts and building blocks. There are also more miscellaneous categories like responsible for, stakeholder, or role A is responsible for the associated artifact B. So this could be something when you have a requirement where you have a person like who came up with that requirement, or if you have a change request, who created that change request, who is now in charge of implementing that change request. This is where you have the responsible for relationship. Then you have a background relationship, which assigns the background information to a requirement artifact, such as a standardization document relating to a requirement. Then you also have a comment, which is just a comment.